You're listening to Civic from the San Francisco Public Press. San Francisco voters are being asked to decide how to move forward with the system of commissions that helps guide the city's bureaucracy. Earlier this year, the civil grand jury released their recommendations on this very subject in a report titled, Commission Impossible.
We chose to look into commissions is that there had been a number of pretty significant articles in the press about the commission system sort of contributing to the bureaucracy that makes it hard to make progress. Probably the biggest issue with the commission system in San Francisco right now is that there is no single authoritative body that's in charge of it. And so it's very ad hoc in lots of ways that make it inefficient.
I'm Mel Baker, and this is Civic. Propositions D and E on San Francisco's November 2024 ballot would change the way the city manages its existing system of commissions in San Francisco. Here's a short explanation of both of them. Proposition D would dramatically alter governance in San Francisco. The measure would slash City Hall commissions from the current 130 to a maximum of 65, retaining 20 major commissions. The Board of Supervisors would then have to decide which commissions to keep or consolidate by spring of 2026. Together, SF Action gathered enough signatures to get Proposition D on the ballot. CEO Kanishka Chang says the creation of so many commissions has made the city ungovernable.
They're supposed to provide oversight of the city departments. Those departments that are supposed to be managed by the mayor are now supposed to be managed by commissions that have doubled in size since the 90s.
Mayor London Breed's staff helped together SF Action write the charter reform amendment, but she pulled her support for Prop D in August after the Mayor Mark Farrell for Yes on Prop D campaign committee raised over $2 million. Breed says the charter reform measure has become a vehicle to help Mark Farrell funnel unlimited amounts of contributions to his mayoral campaign. If Prop D passes, whoever becomes mayor would appoint the majority of commissioners and gain full control over hiring and firing of department heads. Board of Supervisors President and mayoral candidate Aaron Peskin fiercely opposes Proposition D. He says it would take an axe to city governance and create a breeding ground for corruption. Peskin has sponsored Proposition E, which would instead create a task force to study commission reform. Supporters of Prop D say that measure is a poison pill meant to delay reform. Proposition D passes with a simple majority. Proposition E would create a 5-member task force to assess San Francisco's many commissions and recommend whether they should be altered or eliminated to improve local governance. The measure was placed on the ballot by Board of Supervisors President and mayoral candidate Aaron Peskin to counter Proposition D, which would strictly cap the number of city commissions, limit their power, and give the mayor greater authority to hire and fire department heads. Peskin says Prop E ensures that changes will be made to the city's structure with transparency and input from the public and experts.
By creating a task force to review and streamline the city's commissions, Prop E offers a thoughtful, expert-driven approach to improving efficiency, reducing waste, and saving taxpayer money.
Opponents of Proposition E call it a poison pill to undermine all reform of the commission system. The Commission Streamlining Task Force created by Prop E would have until February of 2026 to issue its recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, which would then put those changes before voters in a future election. Proposition D, on the other hand, would require that the changes to the commissions and to the city governance structure be completed by the same timeline of early 2026. Campaigns supporting Prop E have raised about $18,000. Campaign committees opposing Prop E and supporting Prop D have raised more than $7.8 million, the largest amount by far for any San Francisco proposition in this election cycle. Proposition E passes with a simple majority. If both D and E pass, the one with the most votes cancels the other. You can learn more about these measures by visiting the San Francisco Public Press election guide at sfpublicpress.org. Before either proposition was crafted and placed on the ballot, San Francisco's civil grand jury carried out an in-depth study published in June of 2024 on how the commissions are structured and why they've been part of San Francisco's government since the city charter was adopted in 1898. No one on the civil grand jury helped craft either Proposition D or E, or has been part of the campaign for those measures. For transparency's sake, the San Francisco Public Press Executive Director Lila LaHood is on the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. And while that's an unpaid position, she does have access to the city's healthcare options.
I'm John Monson. I am the co-author of the San Francisco Civil Grand Jury Report, Commission Impossible.
What exactly is a civil grand jury?
A civil grand jury in the state of California is a group of 19 jurors who are impaneled for a year-long term, and their goal is to identify opportunities for improving the efficiency and effectiveness of government. Every county in California is required to have one, and the output of civil grand juries is reports that kind of review and make recommendations about the topics that the grand jury is investigated.
So how does a grand jury get selected?
You fill out an elaborate application, at least this is for San Francisco. It's kind of akin to a college app. That's how I thought about it when I applied. But really what they're doing is just trying to disqualify people that would have characteristics that they think would not be a good fit for being on a jury. And some of them are simple things like, are people technical enough to be able to do the work and collaborate using the software tools that are being used? And they're looking for people that are not too partisan, some things like that. So eventually a group of people meet the qualifying criteria, and if there are more than 19 of them, then it's the same as the regular jury process. They do a random process to give everybody a number from 1 to however many there are, and the top 19 get selected.
Do they kind of look for other characteristics like professional skills, like, say, in accounting, law, those sorts of things? Do those come into the...
Not really. In some cases, they're looking for a foreperson, and so there might be some management or leadership skills that are evident in a few of the jury applicants that, might. I'm not sure how the preference for those gets factored into it, but that is one of the things that they need to do is make sure they've got somebody that's qualified to be the foreperson.
So the idea is to try to get as broad a take from the citizenry as possible. So you'll have people with different skill sets, different education levels, but they can meet those basic criteria and fulfill the top 19 candidates.
That is right. And our jury was very diverse, from left to right, young to old, the variety of kinds of experience we have. Now, obviously, these are all people that have time to participate in the jury, and it's a significant commitment. In the beginning, so they say 10%, you should, be able to budget 10%. But in the beginning, maybe it was close to 10%, probably still a little bit more. But when you get into heavy report writing, it's quite a bit more than that.
So what drew you to becoming a grand juror yourself? And was this the only term you've been a juror?
This is the only time I've done anything like this, actually. It's kind of my deepest foray into politics, if you will. And when we went around the table and asked each other, why we were there, everybody had the same answer. They saw a city that had real problems that we were struggling to deal with, and they found this to be a way that they thought they might be able to help.
So this is taking the idea of jury service in a very different direction. So many of us that get called to a civil jury or a criminal jury, the tendency is to, oh gosh, I don't want to spend 3 weeks doing this, or I don't want to become involved in this. But this is really an example of citizenship and taking full advantage of the opportunity to serve.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody was very committed to that idea.
So why does the general public know so little about grand juries? I think most of them think it's some version of they get drafted to be on a jury.
There are two flavors of grand juries. There's a criminal grand jury and the civil grand jury. And you're right, most people are more familiar with the criminal grand jury. And that, I think, is a more selective process than the regular jury selection process, and I don't know a lot about that. But the civil grand jury, yeah, I had no idea about it, and I was at a local neighborhood political club meeting, and they were encouraging people to apply to the civil grand jury, and I looked on the website and said, oh, this seems like something I might be able to do. So, I think it's something that is not well understood, and I do think that the reports generally get a decent amount of press coverage when they get released, but then it's kind of a year before there's more discussion about the results of a grand jury. So, I think that more awareness of the grand jury and more applicants would be a good thing. It would make the grand juries more effective.
Who administers the grand juries?
It's administered through the Superior Court.
You get resources from the Superior Court, the same sort of staff that would assist judges assist you, correct?
To some extent, yeah. There's an administrative person who is assigned to the grand jury, and they're fantastic and provide lots of wonderful support. But it's not a big burden, I don't think. The amount of administration that is generally on a day-to-day basis, it didn't feel like that was a lot. So, but those are the people that do it.
And how do you get information for your questions? So does the administrator, you propose questions, say, how many commissions are there? Or how many, you need some information from a department under the mayor, or you need information from the board of supervisors. The administrator kind of manages that contact information?
There's kind of two processes. One is how do we select what we're going to investigate, and then the second is how we go about it. And so in terms of the selection process, it's just up to the jurors. Now, there is a process for submitting complaints to the grand jury for investigation. There aren't a lot of those, but they would come into the Superior Court, and then they would hand them off to the jury. And we had a handful, and then we would decide whether we thought they were worth pursuing or not. In terms of the actual investigations themselves, the jurors are completely responsible. We also get support from the San Francisco City Attorney's Office. And so if we need somebody to encourage people to agree to meet with us or something like that, we do have a way to go about that. But yeah, we have full subpoena power. We can talk to pretty much everybody. And so that's one of the things that's super interesting about the grand jury is you get access to information, people, institutions that you can't really get any other way as just a regular member of the public.
So that's also true. That that's different than the way a journalist, like here at the San Francisco Public Press, if we do an investigation, we have to go and reach out for the information, find where the information would be. If it's not forthcoming, we have to file FOIA requests. You actually have the city attorney has your back for all of that. If you need a number, somebody's going to cough it up.
We send an email or make a phone call or walk into somebody's office, and they're mostly extremely accommodating. So it wasn't really a significant problem at all.
So grand jurors aren't going in digging through file boxes of old data from the 1930s or something. They're getting
we did that too, actually. I mean, with commissions, going back and understanding how they got started in the beginning, and some of the lifting the fog report went back to kind of see how we ended up with the government structure that we have, and yeah, I spent hours in the library going through boxes, and it was fascinating. That was one of the more fun things that we did together.
So you published this report in June of 2024, and we're going to get into the history of that. I was surprised how long the commission system was in place, and it does sound like you're going into old file boxes and looking at stuff from the last century. Back in 1898, there were 21 commissions created under the charter from the city and the county of San Francisco. The charter, for those who don't know, is more or less our constitution for the city and county. How did that system begin, and what were some of those early commissions, and what was their role in city governments?
Great question. And I'm actually going to go back to 1846 because that's interesting as well.
We're going back to the gold rush.
Pre-gold rush, yeah, exactly. So back in 1846, there was a county called San Francisco that wasn't officially part of the state of California because California didn't exist at that time. Population was about 1,000. But the creation or evolution of the county of San Francisco is important in the process of understanding how commissions ended up coming about. So in 1850, California joined the Union. Population was now about 50,000. And one of the first steps the state legislature took were to designate San Francisco official county of California. And then in 1856, the San Francisco County boundaries were consolidated to be the same as the city boundaries, and that was done to create space for the County of San Mateo. So from then until 1897, they had consolidated boundaries for the city and county, but the city government was separate from the county government. And so there were constant tensions between the city government and the county government. And counties are run by boards of supervisors, and cities are run by mayors, city councils, city managers, depending on where you are. And so this whole push-pull and kind of tension between board of supervisors and the executive branch or the mayor's office have literally been in effect since the late 1800s. 1897, getting to the charter, or the new charter that was voted on by the residents at that time, they consolidated the city and county governments into a single municipal government. And they created three branches. And this is the thing that I think is underappreciated. So the obvious ones are the Office of the Mayor, the Executive Branch, and the Board of Supervisors, which is the legislative branch. Part of the tensions between the city government and the county government were that there was a perception, or probably more than a perception, I read about it in a couple different historical references, that the city government was corrupt and inept and that the county government was actually pretty effective. And so when the elders at the time, mostly business people, they wanted a strong mayor because they felt like having a strong executive was the way you got things done. But they were wary of the potential for corruption. And so they needed a system for providing executive branch or mayoral oversight. And that was really the motivation for putting the commission system in. And there were some administrative things. So, the original commissions included the basic ones, like police, fire. I think Park and Rec was one of the first ones, that kind of stuff. But yeah, mostly it was just to have some way of overseeing the executive branch. And the way the charters are written, if you think of a Venn diagram of the executive branch, the Board of Supervisors, and the commissions, the Board of Supervisors and the mayors do not overlap because in the charter, it specifically limits the involvement the Board of Supervisors can have in day-to-day operations of running the city.
So this is really interesting. Somebody who's lived here since 1992, I didn't realize that the commissions are, in a way, kind of a replacement for what a city council would have done if we had San Mateo County was San Francisco County, and we would have individual cities that would have overseen their mayors, and then the board would have been focused on county issues. So the commissions are more than just an outgrowth of a bureaucracy. They were an intentional effort to kind of hem in the mayor, and we do know our history.
That's right.
Some very, very corrupt mayors over the decades.
That's right. So, yeah, it's a more important part of the structure of our government than most people realize and appreciate.
In your June grand jury report, you list 115 commissions, and the literature for Props D and E list 130. You point out that we don't have a firm grasp on the number of commissions, advisory boards, and other bodies that we have in the city. Why exactly is that? Why was it so hard to figure out how many of these organizations and groups exist?
One of the reasons that we chose to look into commissions is that there had been a number of pretty significant articles in the press about the commission system sort of contributing to the bureaucracy that makes it hard to make progress. And when the reporters would dive into this, they would quickly realize that there's no easy way to figure out how many commissions we have. So we looked into that. And so there's a variety of sources. And the most official one is produced by the city attorney's office. And we call that the legal view. And they're basically producing a list that is all the appointive bodies that exist in the charter or some administrative code. But then the mayor's office has their own list because they have a list of commissions that they need to make appointments to. And so it's mostly driven by their need to keep on top of their appointees. And the city administrator is supposed to have a list. The Board of Supervisors has a list because with their MADI Act requirement, they need to make public all of their appointments. And there's various other lists. The budget and legislative analyst gets tasked with producing a list from time to time. And my take on this is that most of these processes are sort of compliance-oriented more than they are trying to get our arms around the system and manage it. And probably the biggest issue with the commission system in San Francisco right now is that there is no single authoritative body that's in charge of it. And so it's very ad hoc in lots of ways that make it inefficient.
So when things are going well, what kind of work do these commissions and advisory boards do? And how does that help the city overall?
That's a complicated question, actually, because their range is extremely broad. And I think that's another thing that is sort of complicating, which is that we talk about commissions. That's the word that's used to describe appointive bodies, but there's all kinds of commissions and how they get created. So there are charter commissions, there are commissions in the administrative code and other kinds of codes. There are commissions that are required by the state government, the federal government. So there's a lot of different reasons for commissions, and some of them are decision-making bodies. Most of the charter commissions are decision-making bodies. Some of them are advisory bodies. There's passive meeting bodies. So there's all these different flavors of bodies. And so what, makes one commission work is not going to be the same thing that's going to make another commission work. And we found that in general, the charter commissions that are decision-making bodies, and those are the big ones that, most people would be familiar with, the Planning Commission, the Fire Commission, Police Commission, the ones that overlook some of the bigger departments, the Public Utilities Commission, Rec and Park, things like that they in general run pretty well. And they're essentially providing oversight in that they get to review budgets and sort of keep track of what is going on. And today, at least, have some influence over the leadership in departments that they might be overseeing, things like that. And then you can kind of go to the other end of the spectrum and you have some citizens advisory committees that, are basically collecting feedback from communities to figure out what are the kinds of investments in those communities that might improve the neighborhoods the best, at least according to the people that live there. And those are very grassroots oriented. They're run much more informally. They don't have a professional staff that's supporting them. And so the key to effective commissions, at least in my view, is the extent to which they connect the public with the business that is being overseen. The closer the people that are providing the services are to the public, the more effective the solutions are going to be. And so that's really the key. And, we found that departments have their ways of reaching out to the public. The big charter decision-making commissions have their ways, which are different and probably extend a little deeper than the departments. And then advisory boards even extend more deeply into the communities. So there's benefit associated with all of these activities.
So let's go over those numbers as I understand them from the report. So 115 commissions, and we use that term to mean a number of different things.
Yeah.
52 are decision-making commissions.
That's right.
63 are advisory only. Of the 52 decision-making, some have quasi-judicial functions. So those are the big ones like police commission, correct?
Quasi-judicial just means that they are adjudicating decisions or laws in some way. And so the Planning Commission has a review process and appeals boards and things like that. So those are the ones that are quasi-judicial.
And then the number of advisory boards has really exploded since the 1970s, according to some of the data you've shared. And is that part of this long-term effort to be more community-based? I mean, that's about the same time we went to district elections initially for Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of trends there. One is I think that the Board of Supervisors sort of discovered that by creating advisory boards, they could create another kind of oversight opportunity that is more community-based. And I think some of those advisory boards that were created at that time with that motivation are quite good. And then there are also times when the Board of Supervisors was facing a hard issue, and whichever way they decided, they knew they were going to alienate somebody, and it was easier for them to create a new commission to go study it than for them to make the hard choices. So there's a combination of those things over that time. And I think it kind of got to be a little too easy to create advisory boards. And so it's just like, oh, we'll create another advisory board here. And of course, people, I want to be on an advisory board.
So one thing I was really shocked to see is there's about 1,200 people on these various commissions. Up to 15% of those overall seats are never filled. And some commissions, because of people being out sick or they just have a bare minimum number or not enough people, don't even have a quorum to hold meetings. How widespread was that?
It's a big deal. It's not that the seats are never filled. I mean, seats get filled and then they get vacated and they need to get filled again. But at any given point in time, there's 10 to 20% of the seats are vacant. At least that was what we found. And you can get the data from the MADIAC reporting that the Board of Supervisors does and see exactly how many vacancies there are. And you can automate that with technology. And so we did do regular check-ins to see exactly how many vacancies there were over time.
This is a group of 1,200 citizens in the city are heavily engaged in local politics because they want to be on a commission. So that's kind of like an entry-level rung. Just as your perspective, does that one reason that we have such brutal local politics is because we have such a large number of people that are heavily involved. I mean, the upside, of course, is that we have a lot of citizens that really care about the city and they're focusing on their issue and things. But it also explains why we have so much jockeying for position and so much turn in our political structure.
I think it's a reasonable question and maybe point of view to have that we kind of have too much democracy in this way. So I'm not sure where I come out on that, but definitely it's a topic of discussion. So on the number of 1,200, so that's how many commission seats are authorized in the various charter and codes, et cetera. So I think it's probably not the case that there are 1,200 people that are ready to fill them, which is one of the reasons that we have so many openings. And I would say there's two key reasons. The high level one, this is my own personal opinion, just having gone through this experience, is that, if you kind of think about peak commissioner capacity in San Francisco, it's lower than 1,200. We just don't have a big enough population to really support that many commissioners. That's my opinion.
So of these commissions, some are obviously pretty close to being full-time. A lot of work. I mean, being on the police commission or the planning commission, you're having lots of meetings. It's very complicated. It's very stressful. Maybe some of these advisory committees are something you only go to once a month or so, and it
really depends on the people. I mean, obviously the workload on the higher profile commissions is, significant regardless of your level of commitment. There's just a bunch of work you have to do. But yeah, we uncovered people that at every level that are super passionate and doing everything they can every day, and other people that, probably been on commission a little bit too long, and probably be good to get somebody with a little more energy.
One thing you did recommend in the commission report was that there be another commission created to oversee the commissions. I loved the way it was written. You were pointing out that, yes, we understand how ironic this is, that we think we should add another commission to oversee the other commissions. But what would that do?
So going back to my comments about the lists, so there's all these different organizations who produce their own lists for their own purposes. And there is no one single authority responsible for keeping track of the commission system. And so I mentioned that the city attorney's office produces the sort of what we call the legal view of the commission system. But there are also other views that are just not tracked in any kind of regular or structured way. And like we call the operational view, which is like, how many meetings are being missed or how many meetings are actually taking place, vacancies, lack of quorums, just checking agendas to make sure that the business that's being attended to is meaningful. How are commissions actually performing? So that's a very important view. Then there's what we call the relevance view, which is, what do the department heads think? What do the commissioners actually think about what the purpose of the commission is and how well it's achieving or producing results relative to its purpose? And then after that, there's a street view, which is like, how are commissions affecting the quality of lives of San Franciscans? And so those last three things, there is no organization responsible for looking into that stuff. It's just not done. I think literally maybe the first time that it was done was our Commission on Possible Investigation.
And that at the very least must be fertile ground to say that the system is out of control if there's nobody kind of being able to oversee it. Because if it's supposed to be a check on the mayor, if it's literally designed from the very beginning to be something that's kind of the third part of our government, it does need to have some sort of centralized thing. So should this commission be created by appointees, or should we be electing commissioners for the commission oversight body, or how might that work?
Well, our recommendation lists criteria for the types of people, and so different city departments would be responsible for appointing people. And then we have space for a couple residents of San Francisco as well. And our goal was to keep the whole management of commissions as apolitical as possible. And we felt that having residents on that would contribute to that. There's a lot of anxiety among politicians that a body like this would become politicized and become too powerful and then have too much influence on whatever. And when we were making our presentations to the GAO committee of the Board of Supervisors with our recommendations, you could tell there was a representative from the mayor's office, and then there's the members of the GAO committee. And, they have this anxiety too. So it's a tricky question is to figure out what's the best way. But, the Prop D and Prop E are both recommending temporary streamlining task forces, and they both outline who should be on those task forces, and they're all slightly different. And there's certainly commonality between our recommendations and both of those recommendations. But yeah, I think it's a challenging issue, and I think figuring out a way to do it so that everybody can get comfortable with it, but so that we can have an organization who's responsible for just making sure the system works. That's what is needed. And I would say that this could be a model for lots of places in San Francisco government, that too many decisions are being driven by politics instead of just getting the job done the best way it could be done.
Let's jump beyond D&E. Let's assume that one or other of them has passed, and that does set in motion commission reform. This has got to be a political can of worms to open up whatever timeline it takes to reform the commission system. From your overview of this, so many different factions within the city, groups within the city, have a stake in having their commission represented, and reform in one sense calls for fewer commissions or more merged commissions. What are some of the stressors you see on the political system going past this election as the city kind of grapples with any major changes to the commission system?
So if you look at a number of reports and initiatives, they all say everybody's in agreement that commissions need to be reformed. And so I actually have a high level of confidence that reform will happen, even though when we presented to the GAO, they basically rejected most of our recommendations, but they did that because of the context of the ballot initiatives. They just couldn't agree with things when the political situation is so uncertain. But regardless of who wins, there's going to continue to be efforts to reform commissions. I think if Prop D wins, there'll be quickly spun up an effort to add more commissions back. And I think that Prop E, it's also temporary, but I think it could be the beginning of something that would lead to a more permanent organization to keep track of it. Could end up being in the city administrator's office. And I do think that there are options for how this could move forward, though some people would say that the city administrator's office might be too close to the mayor. I mean, all these issues will need to get puzzled out. But the thing that impressed me is how literally everybody we talked to, and even, was definitely a part of the conversation in the GAO meeting, it's like, yeah, we need commission reform. So, a lot of people are like, oh, well, Prop E is just here to FUD the process and, nothing's really going to happen. But I'm a political novice here, but I believe what these people are saying when I hear them say it. So I'm confident that something will be figured out. The mayor's has her ED 24-3, and that's going to spin up an effort. Spur's going to be moving forward with an effort. So there's really smart people with incredible reputations in San Francisco that are committed to moving forward with this stuff. So I'm at least an optimist that this will happen. And then the people I worked with, they're also very interested in seeing commission reform. So, we continue to be interested in being involved it's going to take a few years. So we're up for that.
Can you imagine a grand jury being called, say, for the passage of either of those props to weigh in? Whatever happens, this is going to be a political explosion. No matter what happens, a lot of the political talent in this city, a lot of the legislative power, a lot of the mayoral power is going to be spending a lot of their energy determining what this is going to eventually look like. Do you see that taking up a lot of the city's bandwidth? Am I overestimating how hard this is going to be?
Well, I would say that it would be hard to overestimate how hard it's going to be. The grand jury also published the Lifting the Fog report, which is about how the current structures of San Francisco government can get in the way of making progress. And Spur's Design to Serve report does the same thing. And so commissions is just part of that. And so I think it's going to be a larger conversation about, hey, maybe we should go back to your idea. Maybe we should go back to a city council. Or there are some actual structural problems that have been with us for a really long time. And that now we're at a point where rethinking that might have some merit.
Commissions aren't unique to San Francisco, but as John Monson pointed out, they were intended to offer independent oversight and accountability and a means to fight corruption in our combined city and county. For more information about what San Franciscans will be voting on this November, check out our election guide at sfpublicpress.org. I'm Mel Baker, and you've been listening to Civic. Civic comes to you from KSFP LP 102.5 FM in San Francisco, a project of the San Francisco Public Press, a nonprofit investigative newsroom. Find the companion article for this episode and all our reporting at sfpublicpress.org. Our theme music is by John Dillon. Additional music was supplied by the Blue Dot Sessions. Our team includes producer Liana Wilcox and executive director Lila LaHood. Civic airs Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. on KSFP. New episodes on Thursdays. For more information about what San Franciscans will be voting on this November, check out our election guide at sfpublicpress.org. Thanks for listening.